research writing is quite important, not just for our academic career, but also for our general life and for our democratic society. In democracy, the entire democratic function is related to public opinion, debate and discussions, negotiations, dialogue, and the way we talk. And that's why in democratic societies, we have television, we have journals, we have newspapers, we have think tanks, we have research centers, we have universities, and we give enough space for debate and discussions. It doesn't matter whether we agree with these opinions or not, but we have to allow a space where people can speak, can express, and can share their opinions and thoughts. And the more qualified and the more articulated these expressions are, we can conclude that the quality of intervention, the quality of intellectual intervention is also good. So people are more engaged, they are more convinced, the authorities are forced to consider their opinions, and they are also considering these discussions. And that is why for our research career, as well as for a democratic society, research writing is always important. Even if we are not going to join academia, but sometime in our life, we are going to use these methods. And that is why it is important that we have some sort of training for research writing and research-centric, research-oriented thought process. So here we have a very good friend, Dr. Abdul Raheem Shariq, who will be speaking after some time, and he will cover some practical issues, including some research methodology, and especially the research proposal and research statement, which we generally apply for when we apply for a foreign university, even in our national universities. So he will be focusing on that part. What I would like to share here is how should we think about research. And as an academician, the difference between research thinking and non-research thinking or fiction thinking is that in fiction thinking, we create things out of nothing. We imagine things. In research, we say that we do not have any place for our imaginary thoughts. We have to prove them. We have to provide some evidence. We have to show them with qualitative or quantitative data. We have to use some sort of methodological tools so that we can prove that these are the thoughts which can be proven in this way or that way. And that is why research thinking is completely different from normal or daily thinking. So we are going to, I'm going to introduce you some of the processes through which we generally go in our research writing. So how we are going to do that? I am going to tell my own story. And that is where this session is important for you, because whenever you are going to your supervisor, you may also experience the same thing. So it is how supervisors normally treat or give you a training for research writing. So my personal experiences, for example, my supervisor was Professor Girjesh Pant in Jawaharlal Nehru University. He was an economist, and he was an expert of economic and development issues in the Persian Gulf. So first time when I completed my M.Phil, and then we spoke about writing a dissertation. So he said that you should bring me a note, just 300 words. What exactly you want to do? Bring me a note of 300 words, and then we will talk about it. So I spent some days and I wrote 300 words. I took them, the note, to my professor, and then then we talked about these ideas, and I should say that my entire note was rejected and thrown into dustbin, because whatever I had written that at that time, when I talked with my professor, I could not defend it. So they were not defendable. They were not methodologically, they were not provable or debatable. So I have to delete sentence by sentence. So he started like that. You have said this and this. So how you are going to talk about it? It means that your statement is not right. So he told me that I should rewrite it, and the word count should increase, which means that I should bring it into 500 words or 700 words. I again brought a new note, and then we did the same exercise. And again, this time, only few lines survived, and most of the note was rejected. And it is how it went, and almost 10-15 drafts we exchanged, and we talked about. And finally, at 15th or 16th draft, I was in position to produce a 20-page research proposal. The journey from 300 words to 20 pages research proposal is that we have to have clarity of thought. What exactly we are going to do, what we want to do, what kind of arguments we are having in our minds, and how we are going to prove them. Do we have enough resources or not? So there are so many questions which have to be considered before you proceed for your research statement or your research proposal. So the first step, if we see this journey, the first step will be that we are going to identify a research topic, what you are going to work. Yes, of course, many of you are students of economics, many of you are students of film studies, journalism, maybe sociology, political science, but you have to have a topic in your mind that you want to work. And how you are going to finalize a topic? Of course, your supervisor will be of much help in this regard. But when you go to the supervisor, because what we are talking right now is before going to the supervisor, before getting enrolled in the university. So what we are trying to understand here, that when we write a proposal for our university, for our department, for our HOD, so he in first sight should like it and should think that we should give admission to this student and we should consider this student. So we have, the first thing is to identify a research interest on what you want to work, on what you can work. So how you are going to finalize, or you are going to propose a topic, that is where you have to spend a lot more time. First thing is that, in my understanding, you should love your topic, your interest. You should like it. Because if you do not love your topic, if you do not have passion for your topic, then perhaps you are going to do it half-heartedly. So it means that you are not going to invest full of your energy. And then the topic may not be justified. So whenever you are going to decide a topic, whenever you are going to find a topic, you should invest your energy. And if you do not like the topic, just drop it. Don't force yourself. And when you are going to like a topic, or when you are going to love your subject, then you are going to study about it more and more. So here your exercise starts. For example, now you are a student of political science, and you are going to research or you are going to write a thesis on the role of social media in democratic process, whether, for example, you have a question whether social media have democratized the democratic space or not, whether they have challenged democracy or democratic space, or they have really helped and facilitated the democratic space. So if you have to work on this topic, then it means that first you have to study some good papers on this subject. So you, before you are going to propose anything to your supervisors or to any university, whatever subject you are going to propose, you have to bring few books, go through with it, and then try to understand the subject and have your own ideas, engage with that topic critically, try to build many scenarios. Sometimes we read a book in one way. We are reading the author, his arguments, we are taking it completely, and then we are going ahead. The best style of reading, especially in research, is when you read one paragraph, then you have to organize a seminar in your mind. If I am not in agreement with this author, then the same argument can be said in a different way. So, for example, author has argued that this is going to happen in this way. And you have to force yourself that, yes, if I disagree with this statement, how it can be different from the present argument. So playing with arguments, dealing with arguments, you have to deconstruct many arguments. You have to try to change these arguments. You have to rephrase them, re-narrate them, and have to build many scenarios. So this comes when you deal with the book and you read it interactively. Yes, of course, you are only one person who is reading, but you and your mind and the author. So here, sometimes it may take time to read just one paragraph, but if you force yourself in that interpretation and argument with that book, then it means that you are trying to understand this argument in more qualified way. And that is one of the best and very healthy exercise when you read a book, especially an academic book. And here you have your own interest. Sometimes you find really interesting arguments. Sometimes you can, when you disagree with the book, sometimes your arguments can be really impressive and can be acceptable for the author. And here, when you are going to write a book review, and if you mention that argument that yes, you have read the book, but you think that this argument can be challenged, and in this way it can be challenged, so this review can be really interesting for other readers. And that is why we have to have a habit of reading the books in a more interactive way. So here we are going to have identification of a research topic. A research topic is normally very small topic, not huge topic. It cannot be general. For example, we cannot say the state of democracy in India. It is a huge topic. We cannot say environmental crisis. It is a very big topic. So we have to shortlist the topic. We have to make it specific to one issue, one argument. So it means that it is not just enough that you are going to have one subject, but also within subject another subject. So subject of subject of subject. So the more you are going to narrow your subject, it means that you are going to have a really new, interesting, and unique subject. And one of the most important requirements in all universities is that you should propose a topic which should look unique. It should not be the topic which has already been worked by many people, and the same argument have already been given and discussed. So it means that your research proposal should look promising and contributing something new in academia. Yes, there are many people who have already written about environmental issues in India. But if you are going to work specifically, for example, the role of industrial pollution in Yamuna, this can be more precise. And within this subject, if you are going to work on some specific chemicals, that can again be more narrowed. And within these chemical things, if you are going to say that this kind of chemicals are can pollute the Yamuna river in this way, then it means that you are going to be in really unique way. So within subject, you have to find how precisely you can choose a subject. And that is where we need to have a subject which is really unique, and it can offer some opportunity for new contribution in academia. And that is where I said that identification of a research topic is important. Then there are some logistical issues. Among them, of course, you have to find a good university for your subject. You have to find a good supervisor. And European universities, normally we approach the supervisor first, and then we talk with him whether we can work on this subject or not. For example, if you apply for German scholarship, first you have to find a supervisor. In US universities, it may be different. Abdul Raheem Shariq is going to inform you much about it. So it is different university to university and country to country. But in some countries, you have to contact directly with this potential supervisor, and you have to talk with him for a long period, and you have to finalize your subject. So finding a good supervisor, finding a good university is also important, especially if you are searching a foreign fellowship. Then again, coming on the research proposal, some preconditions as a student we should have. First, that there should be some amount of available literature on that. The topic cannot be as there is not a single thing done on that. So it means that you cannot make some good arguments. So it means that there should be some books, some works, some references, so that you can make a research review or literature review. And in all research proposals, the literature review is really important, because you have to tell that 5 authors, 10 authors have done on this subject. They have made these arguments, but you are going to make another argument which has not been covered by these authors. So in literature review, you try to show that your argument has not been covered, or if it has been covered, it has not been covered correctly or not sufficiently. And your argument can add something new into the knowledge of the subject. So that is where the role of literature review is always important in a research proposal. If you are writing a research proposal and you are not mentioning available literature in your proposal, it is your weakness, and most of times such research proposals are not given enough reading and enough attention. And that is where we have to be very careful that we should read the most important books which are about your subject, which you are choosing. And you should mention them, that these authors have talked about your topic in this or that way. So it means that there should be some literature which should be available there. When you are going to choose a subject, then you would need at least primary sources or secondary sources. Secondary sources, as I said, the report or the books which are already available, they are secondary sources. In primary sources means either they can be authentic data released by a government or by a laboratory or by collecting your own data. When you go to a field work, if you collect survey, if you collect questionnaire, if you do an interview, if you do a focus group discussion, these are all what we call as primary data. So primary sources should also be there, and your topic should propose that you are going to use both secondary and primary sources, and you can also generate your own primary source by proposing any methodology of collecting data with your field work. So if you are working, for example, if you are working on migration, so most of time, if you are working on migration, you need a data which you should have collected. You should have gone to a place and collect interviews, do some survey, do some questionnaire, do some focus group discussions, and then you have to understand how the migration issues are going on in that particular country or region. And that is where collecting your own data is also important, and it is part of primary sources. One of the important things is if you are really serious about your PhD thesis and if you are really serious about research career, I strongly recommend that you should have an opportunity for field work, especially if you are a sociology inquiry person. Then I must say that you should have an opportunity to visit a place, to be with that society on which you are working, especially, for example, if you are working on as I mentioned, migration. How migrants or immigrants, they use media, or the impact of social welfare schemes for migration population. So for that purpose, sometimes you need to be there and to see things from your own eyes, from your own observations, and collect these information. So that's why I always recommend all scholars that they should have an opportunity for field work. If you have an opportunity for field work, it means that you are going to learn more. And sometimes you can change your thought. Sometimes you can change your argument, because you are going to have an entirely new observation from there. Then you have to find a methodology which you are going to mention in your research proposal, that you are going to conduct your research with this kind of methodology. These methodology can be different, and you can choose any of them. And there are many. It can be qualitative, it can be quantitative, it can be in form of a questionnaire which you can quantify later on. It can be qualitative. For example, if you are doing a focus group discussion, sometimes we use discourse analysis, sometimes we use content analysis. So there are many analytical tools which we use. So it is always good that we have an understanding that what kind of data collection method may be appropriate for your topic. Most of anthropological studies, they prefer a field work, talking with people, observations, discussions with people, sitting with people. So these are kind of primary methods which they use. In economics, of course, there is lot importance of quantitative data, especially the reports which are coming from governments. And if you are working on development issues, again, you need your own data. Sometimes you need to survey households, their income, their expenditure, or other issues. So it means that you have to clearly mention that what kind of methodology do you want to use there. Then comes the part of writing. As I said, that first draft which you are going to write, you should believe that it is going to be rejected. So you should always think that you have to write at least 4, 5, 7 drafts. The more drafts you are going to write, it means that the more qualified you are going to become in your arguments. And that is where I say that research writing is different from fiction and from journalistic writings. In journalistic writings, you can re-narrate anything which has already been said by anyone. In fiction, you can just write one sentence into 10 sentences. It doesn't matter. And readers really enjoy that. If you have to say wind is blowing, in a poetry, in a novel, you can say it in 10 different ways. And the people and the readers will really like it because they are reading novel. But if you are in research writing, then you have to be extremely precise. You cannot tell a long story without an argument. And sometimes it's just like in our Uttar Pradesh and in many Indian schools, we are always memorizing an essay on cow, for example, and we use it in filler. Even if we do not need it, sometimes we just use that paragraph in an article. Especially, I'm talking about our childhood days. That cow, the essay on cow is always helpful in filling the pages and copies. And there are many jokes about it. But in research writings, these things cannot go. And especially with good universities. If you think that this paragraph is not needed, is not related to this argument, you should simply remove it. And try to find the best relevant and more relevant paragraph in your particular place. And you have to judge your writing more brutally. If you are a good judge of your writing, it means that you can write really some good things. And that is where you have to be your own best critic. If you can criticize yourself, you can improve yourself. And whenever you write something, you should reread it, you should revise it, and you should try to rephrase and re-narrate it. So it means that research writing is really, really precise. There cannot be place for imaginary ideas and unnecessary paragraphs, long paragraphs. There is no need for such things, and there is no place for such things. And here is the importance of argument flow. Whenever you write a thesis or you try to write a research proposal, generally you make in your mind a research, an argument flow. For example, you can say that the role of media in democracy. So now you're starting from one hypothesis that the presence of a vibrant media helps democracy. Now, how? So you are going to make a next argument that media covers the opinion of popular discussion, intellectuals, and other things. Third, that these opinions are counted by the government and taken into consideration, and as a public opinion, they are really under pressure to consider these opinions. So the argument flow is going down. And you can also challenge this opinion, this flow. You can make a counter argument that opinions are published, but the government is not reading, and the opinions are not making any impact, and the public discussions or media discussions are not helpful for democratic process, and media is actually a useless thing for the democratic process. You can make both arguments, but you have to make a flow chart of your argument. And you have to build a flow chart in your mind, and then in your paper, and then you have to check your paper and your research proposal whether you have consistently followed your argument or not. It cannot be that you have made one argument in the beginning of your paper and you are concluding your paper, your research proposal, with another argument which is clashing with your first or initial argument. So it means that you have to very carefully read your entire proposal, whether you have consistently followed one argument in the same line. And that is where you have to be very careful, you have to be very observant for your arguments so that you can make the perfect argument in your research proposal. And the final recommendation, write. The more you are going to write, the more you are going to learn. You can say that you don't want to write, but for a research career, you have to write more. You have to express yourself in writing. So train yourself in writing everything. Yes, for initial days, you may be writing useless things. Then gradually you will learn more. But do not hesitate from writing. If you think that something is going in your mind, just take a pen and try to write it. You should not hesitate from writing, and you have to be more productive in writing things. This writing will be useless. Of course, you will throw it in the dustbin for after some time, but you have to train yourself for more writings. And here, when you write more, when you are producing more, then you have to be your own reviewer. And you have to send these articles or these works to your friends. Find a good company of reviewers. Find a good company of reviewers. Never hesitate to take suggestion from your friends, from your seniors, from your professors. Whenever you write, just give it to your friend. Read it, please, and let me know your fair opinion. A second opinion of your friend, of your professor, of your close circle friends, any person, you should have a good circle of researchers and friends, and of course your teachers, who can give you a good opinion on your works. And that is where, when you write a research proposal, I strongly recommend that you should take the suggestion of your supervisors, your friends, your professors, and of course CSPS is there to give you some good opinion. Whenever you are going to apply, of course CSPS will always be happy to assist you in improving your research proposal. So here are these few recommendations which I have made in writing a research proposal. I hope that these few observations have been will be useful for you. And I think that the discussion of Dr. Abdul Raheem Shariq is going to be extremely useful for you. And here I'm going to stop, and I would like to invite my dear friend Abdul Raheem Shariq, a very good friend and a very good scholar who has been very hardworking in his studies for a long time. I have been his friend from his high school days, and I have seen his consistent hard work in JNU. So you can really trust on his opinion, and you can really trust on his scholarship and his experiences which he is going to share with you. So feel free to ask any question, any doubt, and try to understand this subject with Dr. Abdul Raheem Shariq. So over to you, Dr. Abdul Raheem Shariq.
Thank you, Professor Anas, and it has been a pleasure to speak with this audience. I thank again my dear friend Omair Anas, and also Center for Studies of Plural Societies, for giving me this opportunity to share some advice and some experience. And I hope it will be useful to the audience in one way or the other. So as you know, the specific topic that I'll be speaking today is about how to write a specific type of statement. It's called statement of purpose. But before I go into that, I just want to start with a general note, which Professor Anas was emphasizing in his talk, is the goal of this type of programs is not to give you one specific type of writing tips, but to prepare you as an overall scholar, which is the vision of CSPS, is no matter what you do, no matter what you write, the person reading your work should see you as a qualified scholar in your field. So here is a general motivation. Suppose someone asks you to write something. Just say, okay, write 5 pages, write 10 pages, 20 pages. Now, the first question you would ask when someone asks you to write something is, what do you want me to write? And what are the requirements? And what can I do to make it the best possible writing I can do for that purpose? So writing could be of different types. Someone could ask you to write a journal article. Someone can ask you to write a newspaper article. Someone can ask you to write an editorial. You may have to write a proposal for grant. You might have to write a proposal for your admission. So there are different types of writing, and the most important thing is each writing can be unique in its own way. And in order to be successful in what you're writing, you need to completely understand what are the criteria that you need to meet to make that specific piece very successful. So I think related to this is, as I said, I'm going to talk about statement of purpose, which is about one specific purpose of writing. But suppose some of you never apply for PhD program or do not apply for PhD program in specific institutions. But what would be the takeaway from this talk? So I think the main takeaway again is, so this will tell you how much care, how much effort, how much thought you need to put into writing something to be successful. So even if you don't apply for a PhD program, if you're writing a newspaper article, you still have to follow the same recipe of understanding the purpose of what you're writing carefully, realizing the responsibility of what you're doing, and doing good justice to what you're doing. So I think that would be the general takeaway, regardless of whether you apply for this specific statement or you are interested in something else. So with that general motivation, let me get started with the specific topic, which is statement of purpose. So what I'm going to do in this brief talk is I'm going to share my experience, the things that I've learned to be most important in this process. And I'll share those tips. But the note I want to make in the beginning is these are specific to my experience. And my experience, as many of you know, I work in economics. I applied for education in economics at different institutions. So my experience is shaped by what I have learned in my own field. So it's important to realize that some other fields would have different requirements. So the advice is not to follow specifically by letter, but to understand a general process. And then whatever you're doing, whichever field you're applying to, you have to be careful about what are the requirements for that field, and then you have to prepare accordingly. So let's get started with what about, suppose if you're applying for a PhD program, and how would you write a successful statement of purpose? So this talk, I'll talk about three major components. So I'll start with the background of why statement of purpose and why it is important. And second, I'll talk about the structure of statement of purpose. And finally, I'll give you 3-4 tips on what I think are some of the things we make mistakes, and we should be very careful not to make those mistakes when we're writing them. I will not spend as much time on the second and third topic, because if you just Google, you will find thousands of good statement of purpose that you can use for a structure, that you can use as an example. So I would just give you some broad details, but I think what I want to give is the first part, which is understanding the background of what you're writing and why what you're writing is important and what you need to do to be successful. I think that is the most important part, because if you don't have the right motivation, if you don't have the right perspective of what you're doing, it's hardly going to be a successful or impactful statement of purpose that you would write. And this is again an important recipe for anything you do. If you're writing something, it doesn't have to be a statement of purpose, and you don't have a good understanding of what's the importance of what you're writing and what would be the most important criteria to judge whether it's successful or not. If you don't have a right perspective of that, it's very difficult for you to be successful in what you're doing. But that's why before we do anything, it's very important that we understand what we're doing. So, okay, so let's get started with the first section of what is statement of purpose and why it is important. So let's start it with what all is needed when you apply, say, for a PhD program. So if you're applying for a PhD program, say in a foreign institution, in economics, for example, there are 4 major things that we need to include in our application package. So we need to have letter of recommendations. So these come from professors or scholars who know you very well, with whom you have worked, who can testify to your abilities and your scope and potential as a scholar. And the second main component is statement of purpose, which we'll be mainly talking about today. And the third is your transcripts, which will tell the admission committee about what you have studied, how well have you done in what you have done so far, have you taken the prerequisite courses which are necessary to be successful in the program you're applying for. So those transcripts will tell them about your grades and your qualifications. And finally, there are also requirements. For example, you have to take standardized tests such as GRE or TOEFL. So you take those tests as meeting the requirements of the college or the university. So that's another major part of your application package. Now, if you step back and look at these 4 things, so there are a letter of recommendations coming from your professors or your advisors. There's a statement of purpose. There are your transcripts and your grades, and there is your performance on standardized tests. The last 2 things, transcripts and standardized test scores, think of it as 2 criteria where the admission committee will look at them and make a check mark on your application and set them aside. So those are only a criteria where they want to see if you qualify the filter in a way. So if they require high test scores, if you get high test scores, they would consider the next material. If you don't, they would move on to the next candidate. If they require certain courses and minimum performance in those courses, and if they don't see that in your transcript, then they would move on to the next candidate. So these are just a check mark for doing the first round of filtering for the applicants. So if for a position of 5 or 7 PhD spots, 500 students have applied, they need first set of filtering criteria to move on to the next stage, where they look at a narrow set of focused students. So the last 2 criteria about transcripts and standardized tests is think of it as the first round of filtering mechanism. Now comes to the 2 remaining parts. So once they have filtered a selected set of students, they look at your letter of recommendations and they look at your statement of purpose. And the question is, what do they want to see in these 2 important documents? So here, as the motivation for this part, the first part of the 3 things that I'm going to discuss is the background. It's very crucial to understand what is the admission committee who's going to make a decision trying to see in those 2 documents. And again, going back to the first thing that I said, it's very important to understand what you're doing. And this is not just specific to admission. Suppose you're writing a grant, you need to understand what is it that the grant makers, the people who are going to give you money, want to see in your grant proposal. If you're going to write a news article or editorial piece, you need to understand what is it that you can inform your readers that can help them make the right decision. So you need to understand the most important thing that you need to talk about. That should be the takeaway from your work that you're doing. So, okay, coming back to this, there are 2 things, letter of recommendation and statement of purpose, and you want to understand what is it that these committees looking in these 2 pieces. So what they're looking at is they have a process of spending 5-7 years with you. And at the end of the process, they want this student to be successful. And in these 2 documents, they want to see signals, they want to see information that will help them determine if you are going to be that successful student or not. So first, what is that process? So what happens in those 5-7 years, and what would be the yardstick for judging whether someone is successful or not? But in those 5-7 years that they spend with you, if they give you admission, they invest a lot of resources. They invest their valuable time. Advisors meet you almost every week or every month or something, and they carefully read everything that you write. And it's a very painful process. As Professor Anas explained, that when we join a PhD program, we are not experts. and we are learning, we make a lot of mistakes. When we go with the first proposal, it's completely useless, we are completely off track. But the advisor has to carefully sit, patiently read everything and advise, and it takes time. It's a painstakingly long process. So, and it's not just a one-time process. They have to meet you many, many times, advise you with so many valuable hours. So they're spending so much effort, so much time, so much care into advising you. And it's not just the time, it's a university that's spending so many resources to sponsor your education, because in many cases, PhD, you get funding for PhD education. So they're spending so many resources, so much financial resources and other resources. And they also want to be sure that you're spending them on the right person. So in those 4 or 5 years, so many resources are being spent. And if those resources do not give them the best outcome, they would be disappointed. And what would be the outcome they are most looking, they're looking out of those efforts? They want to create someone who came as a curious, intelligent, smart student. They want to convert that student into an expert in the field. And it's a long process, but they want to reach that goal. So if they spend all these hours and all these resources, and at the end they realize the student they invested for is not able to be a true academic or critical thinker or expert in whatever that person is doing, they would think that their effort was not really fruitful. So this is their broad process. Like when you're selecting a candidate, they want to see someone who can satisfy them at the end of the process in terms of their criteria. Now, how would they see that? They want to see from letter of recommendation and statement of purpose if that seems promising, if that hope that they have, if that expectation they have, is that going to be realized in this particular student? Now let's start with letter of recommendation, and then finally we'll go on to what we're going to talk about. So when you apply for a PhD program, you are not an accomplished researcher yet. You haven't published extensively in your field. You haven't gained the expertise in what you want to do. So they don't have credible evidence to determine if you're going to be successful. It's just a guess game, or it's an expectation that they have to form, but they don't have the hard material to judge that. So how would they form those expectations? Now, the professors that are writing your letters, they can be two categories. So one set of professors, they already have a credibility in their fields. They have published well. They are known to be experts in their fields. People know them. So when they say something about a student, that has a weight and that has a credibility. So if I want to give admission to you in my PhD program, and I don't know you, but someone whom I trust, whom I value their judgment, and they tell me that you are a good student and you'll be successful, then I rather go with that opinion versus just making a guess on other criteria. So that's why the first set of recommenders who are known and respected and trusted, their recommendation can help you stand out. Now, yeah, of course, not everyone is recognized, or not everyone is known by everyone. So the other set of professors who may not be known to the person reviewing your application, but they can still give credible information in their letter. They can say that I have known this student for 5 years or 7 years or 3 years, and this student is good for this reason. So they can give some honest, specific information that they can use to judge you. So that's coming from your professors or your advisors. Now, the other piece is statement of purpose. So far they have been trusting on your professor and experts, but they also want to give you an opportunity to talk about yourself. Like, how can you be a successful student when you come to this university? And I just discussed a few minutes ago what they have in mind when they think about a successful student. So you have to make an important and strong impact in their minds about, in your statement of purpose, that when you go there, you would be a good candidate for them to invest their resources, and you would grow and develop as a successful scholar, expert in your field, which will be a true realization of their efforts. So in your statement of purpose, again, you have an opportunity to make that point. So in summary, like, you have this letter of recommendation, statement of purpose, and what they're trying to see is they want the information they need to determine if you are going to be the right student who will be successful in terms of becoming an academician or true critical thinker at the end of this program. So, okay, so this was the broad motivation of why statement of purpose. I hope that now you're able to realize that while your grades are important, while your performance on TOEFL and GRE and other standardized tests are important, but at the end of the day, those are check marks. It's just a first round of filtering mechanism, important, but not the final determining criteria. But the final thing that they want to see, and the most important thing after you qualify the filter, is coming from your letters and from your own statement of purpose. So that's why it's very important that you make that impression and you give them the right information they're looking for. Okay, so this was about the background. And now in the remaining time, very briefly, I'll go over the structure of what you want to write in your statement of purpose and give 2-3 specific tips that I found to be most useful. So in terms of structure, the statement of purpose, if you're writing, is not a very long piece. It's 500 to 1,000 words, which is not a lot. And as Professor Anas explained that when you're writing a small, say if you're writing 300 words for a note, you have to be extremely careful about what you write in those 300 words. Every single word is important. And you have to put a lot of thought, a lot of care into what you want to say in that limited space that you have to make a point. And the second thing, again, what Professor Anas told you is those 500 to 1,000 words when you write, the first time you write are not going to be the best you can write. It's a process. So you have to start early. You have to write many, many times. And you have to be your own best critic. You have to show it to others, get their feedback. And after many, many rounds of iterations, that's when you would know that this is the best that you can write and submit to the committee. And again, when you have these many words, there are so many things that you have to do, but most importantly, you have to be giving the most important details that they're looking for in making the decision. And also, those details have to be presented in an accessible way. Like if someone reads that but not able to determine what exactly you're saying, or you are very complicated or complex in your thoughts, then you will not be conveying yourself in a precise and concise way. So you also have to make an effort, again, by writing and writing many, many times and getting feedback from so many other people that make sure you write precisely and you convey clearly what you want to convey in that. So in terms of structure, you start with an introduction, and there is a main body where you talk about all the things that they're looking for, and then you conclude. Now, in the practical tips next, I'll mention a few things about what to be careful about when you write these things, but just a description of what goes into each section here. So introduction, you introduce yourself and explain why you are interested in their program. And in the main body, which is the second part of the statement of purpose, majority of it, you talk about your interest in their specific program in more detail. And then you talk about your background, so what you have accomplished so far, what you have done that makes you a good fit for their program. And then you talk about your strengths and your weaknesses. And finally, you talk about what do you dream, what do you consider as your career options once you get admission in this program. So what you want to do once they give you this education. Now, and then you conclude at the end. And then when you conclude, you want to leave an impression on the admission committee with some final thoughts about if they give you an admission in their program, so what would it mean to you? And then what would you do with that offer? So what would you make out of that opportunity if you get an opportunity to study at that program? So these are description of like what goes in each of these 3 parts in your statement of purpose. And again, one thing that I made in the beginning is these guidelines I'm giving are specific to my experience or the programs I applied to. So you have to be, again, very thorough and very careful about your specific program you have in mind and figure out what they ask you to do. If someone asks you to mention why would you be a great fit in a diversified environment, like they want people from different backgrounds, different economic, ethnic, social, nationality, religious backgrounds in the program. If they require that, you would have to emphasize what aspects of diversity you will bring to their program. So this was just an example. So you have to pay careful attention to what they're looking for among their applicant pools, and you have to emphasize those strengths, those elements that you'll bring to their program, and tailor your statement accordingly. So now the final bit of the talk, just talking about some practical advice, not in too many details, but just 2-3 of them, which I think is most important, that we should not make mistakes when we are writing these statements. Now, the one mistake that we make commonly when we write these statements is we write a generic statement, and a committee who's reviewing applications, they dislike generic statements because they think the impression it conveys is that you have not put a lot of effort or thought into understanding their program, and the drawback of that is they are not able to decide whether you will be a good fit for their program or not. So if I have specific strengths and weaknesses as a program in my department, and then you write a very generic, very general letter that can be used for any program, I don't know if you're going to be successful in this specific program, because every program is unique in its own way, and you have to understand what are some of their strengths and weaknesses. And you have to highlight that as being something that you would be most suitable given your background. So just an example, suppose, and this applies to both the documents that I mentioned, the letter of recommendations and also the statement of purpose you write. For example, if your professor is writing you a letter of recommendation and the professor says, he's a great student, he's a very smart student, he's very hardworking, he is very intelligent. So these are very general statements. Usually the committee is not going to, this is not going to be very helpful for the committee. What they want is they want specific information going beyond these general statements that will help them determine. For example, if the professor is saying he's a very smart student, they have to give an example. So they have to say, okay, this student came to me 3 years ago. This student didn't know anything about this topic, but he was very interested in doing some work on improving the effectiveness of this government program. And I advised him, and he was very industrious, very hardworking. And at the end of these 3 years, I find him to be very, very exceptional and very successful in what he did. So they have to give some examples like this to convince the admission committee that this is not some sort of a general talk, but rather they have to substantiate with specific examples to convince them that this is the case. So similarly, if you're writing a statement of purpose and if you say, I'm a great fit, I'm an excellent fit for your program, this is not going to help. You have to explain why. You have to say, okay, I see that your program has this strength in, say, development economics, and specifically because development economics is a big field. In development economics, you have professors working in issues related to developing countries, issues relating to India's, issues relating to gender discrimination. So give these things and then say, I'm also very interested in these topics. And not just interest, you have to say more. You have to say, as a term paper, I did this topic and these were my main findings. And I was really puzzled. I was really surprised to find this finding, but I want to investigate this more. And I think your program would be the best setting where I can explore this further in my education, PhD education. So these examples actually help committee more than making blank and general statements which are which do not have any information. So of course, if a big professor who is known across the field and he's highly accomplished, if that person says, you are a great student, that has some weight. But in most cases, many professors are good, but they are not known by everyone, especially because these days, every single research field is so narrow. It's hard for people to outside your specific topic to know you. So you have to make specific give specific details to substantiate all the claims you're making. So the first tip I would give as writing a successful statement of purpose is to avoid making it generic and rather make it specific and tailor it to what exactly you are planning to apply for the program. And the second thing is when you apply, for example, when I applied, I did not apply to only one program because when you apply, there's a lot of uncertainty. You really like one program, but it's also that you don't know who else is applying, and you may or may not get the admission, so you apply to many programs. So it's fine if you have some generic parts to the application, like some parts you repeat in every proposal, that's fine. But some of the parts you have to make sure that you stand out, and you have to convince the admission committee that you have gone through their program carefully, and you have to convince them that their specific requirements you are able to meet them. So that's the first advice about not being generic in your statement and trying to tailor it to their specific strengths and requirements. The second, related to this generic application, is we, growing up in India, we do not have the advantage of native speakers. What I mean by that is, so sometimes we say things and we mean one way, but it conveys to others the other way. So we have done a lot of research about a program, and we want to write a non-generic statement, but at the end of the day, it might still sound as a generic statement to a native speaker or the person who is reviewing your application. So what you do, like you try to avoid being generic as much as possible, but still due to just the nativity or the command over the language or different cultural nuances, we're not able to convey the interest and the research and the background work that we have done to the admission committee. So that could be one important drawback that also we have to avoid. And how can we avoid that? The way to avoid that is, again, coming from Professor Anas' talk here, is you can be your best critic, but at the same time, you have to try really hard to get feedback from others. So you're still a student, you do your best job, but you may still need feedback from others to determine what else can you do, how else can you write to improve your proposal. So the second thing I would like to emphasize is you must reach out, you must show it to your elders, your superior experts or supervisors, and get feedback from them to improve your statement and make it non-generic. So this is my second advice. And finally, I would say is, so these things take time. As I said, application is a time-consuming process. So you have, say, some things that go as a standardized thing. So you have transcripts. So transcripts, you're not going to create transcript in 1 month. You have to work a couple of years to generate a good transcript. So there's planning worth of years that goes into qualifying that check mark, even though it's a check mark, but you have to work for years to get that. The standardized tests, they're not very easy. They're not very quick. So that also needs to go into an advanced preparation. For example, specific programs have specific requirements. To give you 2 examples, if you're coming to a university where they will support you by some sort of teaching assistant position, they would require certain scores in your TOEFL, speaking or listening or some other specific sections. So you have to work hard to get those minimum qualifying scores in those sections, and that takes time. If you're coming to a maths intensive program like economics or mathematics or physics or some other science programs, they require minimum score in your maths section of GRE, and that requires a lot of effort. If you're going into a writing intensive course that requires minimum score in your writing part of GRE. So those things, those 2 components, even though those are check marks, that requires a preparation worth of years for you to get those qualifying criteria. Now, the second, the LOR and statement of purpose, letter of recommendation and statement of purpose, that requires also a lot of effort, and you cannot generate these things overnight. If a professor has to really vouch for you, really be strongly supporting you, you cannot get that impression and support in 1 month or 1 day. You have to work for years under him or her and convince them that they can put their credibility at stake to support you, because no one wants to put their name and then later be discredited. That, okay, so I trusted this person, I gave admission to this student, and then it turns out that this student is not really hardworking, not really serious, then that goes bad on the professor. So in order to earn that trust for a professor to put their name behind your application, you have to earn their trust, and that takes time. Similarly, if you have to write a statement of purpose, which is really effective, you cannot do that overnight. You have to spend a lot of hours, a lot of time doing your own homework, doing your own work And after that, getting feedback from others and improving it and polishing it to make it a perfect and best possible statement that you can write. So the final advice I have is start early and have a good vision of what you're trying to do. And you have to put in a lot of effort into getting success in that goal. So taking it back to the first thing that I said at the beginning of this talk is, so these all things were about statement of purpose, but what is the general thing that we can take away about academic writing or scholarly writing from this talk, even if you don't apply for a PhD program? So the general thing I would say at the end is, whenever you write, so think of this like maybe writing was a big thing, like just writing was something important in the past. Of course, even in the past, good writing was valued. But these days, there are so many things around for people to be distracted and involved in. You have such limited space to make an impact on their mind. And you cannot write 1,000 words and get someone's attention if you can do the same thing in 100 words, or maybe a tweet that you write and have a really impactful influence on their thinking. So choosing carefully what you say and then having a good understanding of what you need to do, what you need to understand, what background you need to appreciate to be successful in whatever piece that you're writing. Thank you.
Here we would like to conclude the session with my best wishes to all my interns, my friends who are trying to apply for any university for their masters and PhD. We would be more than happy to offer any assistance and help in applying to any university in working on your proposals. The objective of CSPS is just one, that we should see our young scholars in more numbers in the top universities, in the best institutions, and in position of contributing more in academia. So with this desire, we would always be happy to be with you in your research career, and would like to support in whatever possible way we can. So here, I must thank Dr. Shariq for his insightful and his own experiences, of course, which I believe have been very useful for all of us. And I wish that we have many more opportunities to benefit from your experiences, Dr. Shariq. We will be very happy to have you with CSPS again for similar sessions. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for our team, CSPS, Dr. Shiba, the research coordinator, and Mr. Kashif Raz, who have helped this session. So thank you very much. We are signing off now. Until then, goodbye.